This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, so very warm welcome to the next session of SAP Cloud Platform Integration Suite. My name is Sam. So let's quickly look at what we have discussed in our yesterday's session, and from there only we'll just take it forward. Let me just quickly go down. Okay, perfect. So I think yesterday we started first with the topic of exception handling. Now let's say in case if we want to contain some kind of exception scenario in SAP CPI, how to do that particular part. So let me open system also. Okay, let's just quickly go to our package which we have created. Let me go to the artifacts part here. Let me go to this one. Okay, so here I think what we have discussed about exceptions of process. First of all, we can quickly locate this exceptions of process here in this palette, which is there in the process part. So now we know that for a complete process or for your local or for the main integration process, there is only one exceptions of process required. Anytime it fails, okay, whatever the current state of execution was, it will be passed to your exception handling. So we have seen yesterday that how we have a simple language expression defined in by SAP. Okay, so which can give you might be a message processing log ID or might be more detail about your exception. Sometimes it happens that whenever you have to raise any kind of a message to SAP, sometimes might they ask for a process, can you give us an exception so they can look out. Initially when this tool was not that stable, okay, that time I think I myself have done this kind of a stack trace for specific issues where by feature it should work out, and then SAP can actually look into it. I think this is what we have discussed about exception handling into our CPI. Second part I've discussed that might be going forward, we are going to just discuss on one of the advanced scenarios where now if there are different kind of exceptions, how to actually handle into SAP CPI. Maybe we'll just take a use case and we'll just try to draw it out. So this is what we have done on the exception handling part. Second, let me quickly go back. So second topic we started with was the Groovy script. Okay, so what was the example we have taken for the Groovy script? It's one of the scenarios where in your production system you cannot enable a trace. Now, what exactly is the way? So now with the help of a scripting, we can actually log a payload at a specific step. So if you go at a monitoring in the attachment, you will be able to locate it out. So now let's say if I'm just talking about here. So I hope you know again, initially look at all the different kind of steps. Okay, so here in your transformations, we have the script available. So where you have a Groovy or your Java. I think for this particular course, I'll be using Groovy. In case if you are comfortable with the JavaScript, please go ahead. Okay, so we have put a Groovy script. We now know how to create a Groovy script. We just go inside it and we have written a small piece of code to log your script at a specific step here. Okay, so let me just quickly open it up. Okay, so this is script what we have discussed. So I hope all the basics of script, I hope it's clear to you what we mean by the import statement. Okay, because it provides you the functionalities here because the message class is residing in the standard com.get com.sap.gateway.ip core custom.util.message. Process method is important. Process data method name is important. How to define message body. But now let's say in case if you want to read a complete body, how you can do that particular part. Then in your line number 6, we just talked about a global accessible object, which is your message log factory. Okay, again, which is standard given to us by SAP. We are using a message log method here against checking in the next statement, and then again using a standard method add attachment as a string, just defining these three parameters and returning my message part. So we were able to see in my monitoring part how, let me quickly just see. Okay, I think yesterday we saw that when we attach that particular, we use this particular method, which is your add attachment with string. So while monitoring, you will be have a tab enable attachment where you will be able to actually see the payload part. Second thing, I think what we discussed here during the CPI or writing this particular script, that this editor don't expect any kind of a check which is available. I think this is the last script what we have written, that we have missed the keyword return here. It didn't give us any kind of error message. We were able to save, we are able to deploy. And once we executed a message due to which this particular script got into toss. Okay. So this is what we have discussed in our yesterday session about your exception handling in your script. And for this particular part, I have received one or two questions also. So let me just discuss that particular part. Uh, I think one question I think Pradeep has raised, that Sam, why when we just talking about this integration tool, it's more kind of a configuration, then why do we need to do any kind of a scripting? Okay. And second thing is, if we have your, let me just put it out. So now this is your sender system, this is your receiver, and this is your CPI. Okay. So now the second part was, Sam, that first of all, why do we need your script when we have this particular integration tool? Why do we need to write a logic? And I think the second point was more important. He said that, Sam, we do have anytime if we have a sender or if we have some kind of a receiver. Why don't we transform the data here on the sender side or at the receiver side? Why do we need to write a logic into a CPI? I think this is a very fair question what he asked. So to answer you, Pradeep, I think it clearly depends on your use case. Okay, so now let's say if you're thinking about a very vanilla case where you have your both S4 system and might be your SAP on-premise and then might be SAP on cloud. So honestly, what I myself do, I don't write any kind of a logic in CPI. I say very straightforward. Once I have a mapping sheet and I see this can be written on S4 side, okay, uh, which is pretty fast, have more processing logic. Okay, I say very clearly write this kind of logic in your S4. Okay, in case if I see this is not possible, might be I know this can be transformed. One, it's receive to receiver to might be any kind of a receiver system. I say write that logic here myself, because I have seen that whatever we have functionality available, it's very lean, both here on the CPI and again on the cloud side. But cloud side, if you go and build any application on the hyperscaler, so currently we do have very good features which are available, not here into the CPI part. So if I look at from that particular perspective, so approach is clear. First go to your S4 sender, then go to receiver, and then at last, if there is a no chance, then comes to CPI. Most of the time, if you're using a CPI, there are chances that you are using some kind of SAP based systems. Okay. And yeah, there might be, you can just check with this team also, might be send us team, that while sending a data, you can actually you can write a logic and then send it out. Now, what are the cases in which you need to write a script? Guys, currently we are talking about very smooth use case. Now, let's say I'm talking about a success factor system, which is having some kind of a payroll integration. Okay. So now when I'm just talking about a payroll integration, again, this is some kind of a third-party application, and SF is again sending its data. Now, when we are sending any data, might be the format which it needs your receiver system. Okay, it's bit of or the structure, or whenever we're sending a request, it does not want to change their inbounds interfaces. Okay, the reason is in case if you want to change, you have to pay a heavy cost. They can do that, but you have to pay a heavy cost. So in that kind of a scenario, you have to write your logic into CPI. I've seen so many times. Okay, there is a data coming it out from the success factor system because that's a data model. Okay, you need to pass it here. Might be you need to get some kind of details. You need to write a logic. That's one use cases where you have receiver systems which is very fixed, and customer cannot spend it. So you have to write your logic here. Leave about the performance part. That's the first scenario. What are the second scenario? Second scenario is, now let's say I send a request, let's say from a success factor system, and might be, let's say I have one more, uh, while during a call only I have one more system which is sharing me the data. Okay, so now let's say once I hit my request from success factor, it reaches to CPI, and then again I have to again call some system to fetch the data. Might be, let's say, based on employee data, I'm just getting its um, last salary slips. Let's say if I just maintain it here, or might be last expenses. Okay, and I want to concatenate it, then I want to pass it to this payroll systems. So this would be one more scenario where you might have to write some kind of a scripting and a logic part. But yes, if you get a request to do this, definitely I will say evaluate. If this can be done easily on a sender or a receiver system, definitely you should not be writing things on CPI. First try on the sender system if it's a SAP on premise. Okay, I hope this helps you. Okay, in case if again you have any kind of a question, just let me know. Cool. So let me just go back here again. Okay, let me just quickly go back to the package. Let me just quickly click edit. Let me just go to the artifact here. Okay, perfect. So now again, guys, we'll just do one thing. We'll just take one or two scenarios on the script part. Now I think again one more basic part. I thought let's just complete it now only. Let me just quickly click on edit. Okay. So now the second use case is sometime it happens that you are saving some values at your header or your property. Okay. So now let's say in this particular case, I am storing a value at multiple content modifier. Might be I have content modifier here, I have here, okay, and I have some kind of a specific logics. Now let's say based on the values, might be sometime I have to do some kind of a calculation. Might be based on order type. I want to make sure the shipping charge is calculated runtime here in the CPI because that's the kind of a fixed cost. Or there are different kind of use cases which actually which are there. So now let's say in case if I want to read any kind of your header or your property variables, okay, how to do that particular part. So to do this or to achieve this, what we're going to do is, let me first fix this script so that we don't have any kind of error message. Okay, so maybe I'll just use, I think the script only. I don't need to log it at this particular step. Okay, so now let's say, again, I think this is a very easy part, but yeah, you should definitely know this bit. So now let me remove this bit. Again, I think this is like a schema. I think you need this statements import statement defining your method and your return type also, sorry. Okay, so now again, let's say if I want to read any kind of my headers or my properties, or might be they say I want to play with some kind of values, how to do that particular bit. So now first, I think it's always important to read a body. So now let's in case if I want to read a body, sorry. So now I hope everyone knows that if you want to read a body, you can just do message dot get body. Okay, so I think this is one of the most simple statement to read actually your body part. So once you have read your body, so now I think for me important is to read all the headers, all the properties, and might be play around it. Any times again, I think logically you have in most of your programming's your getters and setters. Say we again into your CPI. I think yesterday I've also shown you that this is also available. So now let's say in case if I have to read all the headers, okay, all headers. So what you have to do is you have to just do message dot get headers again, G small, and then remaining one is in capital. Same way in case if I want to read all properties. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna do message dot get properties here. Okay. Oh, come on. Okay. So now I think this is a very simple way that you will be able to read all your headers and your properties. So now let's see what we have, what different variables we have. I'll just take a note. Even there are cases when you have to read this headers and your property in your message mapping also. Okay, so let me just quickly go here. Okay, sorry, I want to see what we have. So at a header level, we have different things. Order sequence, order number. Okay, and at a property level, we have a message payload. Okay, so now I think similarly, any kind of header or your property. So now what I'm going to do here is I know that how to read my headers or my property. So we do have the standard method, which is your message dot get headers and message dot your get properties. So what I can do here is maybe I can just play around with it. So now let's say in case if I want to read a specific header. Okay. So now first we have all the headers now being read in this variable all headers. So now let's say in case if I want to read now let's say in case if I want to read any kind of header. So what I need to do is I just need to do I need to take this variables put dot get. Okay, and now let's say in case if I want to read a specific header variable, so I can do that particular part. So in this particular case, what I can do is might be I can just do order number. Okay, so just make sure that you put it in double quotes and make sure this is case sensitive. So you just do copy paste. Same way, what you can do is might be you can just do temp2, and now let's say in case if I want to read any specific property. Okay, so same way I'm just going to use it for my property variable also. Then dot get. Come on. Okay, so here in all properties dot gets, what I'm gonna do here is I am just going to copy this. I hope there is value in it. So I think that's how you get a specific header field or any kind of a property field if you want. Now let's say in case if I can define a new string and I can just store in that particular part also. Okay, might be what you need to do is now let's say in case if you want to concatenate, I think you can just simply use plus and you will be able to actually concatenate both the things. Temp1 and temp2. Okay, so I think this is all about how you actually read all headers. Sorry, I think there is a again issue with my keyboard. Okay, and then how you read a specific your header or your property variable. So now I think this is the one thing what you can do. I think this is to get. Now again we have a similar way to set the properties also. Let's just do one thing here. I'll just create one more property variable which is like dummy. I'll define as a constant. I'll just leave it like this. Now here what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to make sure that while reading this order number or this property, I have concatenated into a final string, and then whatever the value I have got it. Okay, I'm just going to set into that particular variable. So here I'll just quickly go back. I'll just make sure it's a dummy D capital only. Yep. So now here, now let's say in case if I want to set any variable value, how to do that particular part. Again, I think this is same. You just need to do message dot. Again, we have set property for set property or set header. So now I'm just gonna use your s is small. Just make sure that set property. So here you have this two input parameter. I think the first two is the name of the variable. So now in my case, it would be dummy. Okay, and the second is the value. So now here I'm just going to pass this value, which is my final string. Let me just quickly click on save. I hope guys this is clear. Any question? Very straightforward. Any point here, anyone? No. Cool, thank you.
So you define G property copy in content modifier one.
Where yeah. So I think I have just used I think variable which is
yeah.
already defined at header and property.
Mhm.
What I'm just trying to show is how you can actually read your header and your properties in your script. Just write some kind of a logic, and if you want to set again how to do that particular part. So
Okay.
these were my two variables. I think your order number and your Z property copy. I think this is already defined. One is at header level and one is at property level. So same way I was able to read into a local variable, concatenate, put it into one final variables, and now I've just created one variable at a property and I have set using your dummy. Now let's in
Okay.
case if you want to uh, set might be at header. I think the same way you need to do it out. Sorry guys, I don't know why today is actually creating a lot of problem for me while just keying in. So now same way here, if you want to do for header, you can just do that particular part too. Again, this is just double forward slash just to comment any line. I'll just quickly click on OK. Let me just click on save and let me just deploy it out. This was, I think, default route. So I'll just make sure that I don't pass an order number which is 10249 or 10250. Let me just quickly check what was the condition here. Okay. I think by the time this gets deployed, so let me just quickly start the soap tool also. Just quickly refresh. Yeah, it just might be an exercise for you for tomorrow. Can you just create an iFlow which goes into deployment errors? Or maybe if someone has tried already that while trying to deploy their iFlow has gone for deployment error. Anyone, apart from what I have mentioned. Okay, let me just do one thing. Let me just submit a request. Okay, I think the best way is, the header, the difference between a header and a property, whatever the header values, it flows back to the receiver also. So if I come here on the headers, we have this Z order copy, everything, but I think we have set the value of dummy at a property level. So what I have to do is I have to go ahead and monitor message processing. Okay, so now I hope everyone is quite familiar with how this trace and all the functionality look like. So for me, it's easy because I know how this iFlow works, or how this tracing, or how the message flows. So if I come to this particular end part, I know if I look at the message content, and here if I look at property, so my dummy should be set up as a concatenation. So I think that's what happened. Okay, because if you look at in my order number was the order number which I have passed here, I think, which is your 10234. And again, I think how much I remember, this Z property copy was just having the message body. So in case if you want to validate it out, so this had the complete message payload only. I think so. This is how you will be able to retrieve your header and your property variables. So again, similarly, we'll just write on top of it again more scripts, and we'll just try to have kind of a more meaningful use case going forward. Okay, so this is on your scripting part. Now, I thought why not to discuss about this particular tool also, which I have mentioned yesterday, which is the Groovy id.com/CPI. Again, I think this is again a very good tool to test your parts. Now, how to test? So again, I think this is a very straightforward. Again, this is very similar to your simulation part also. Okay, so when I say very simple, very similar to your simulation, what do I mean by that part? I'll just show you. Okay, so I'll just copy this particular script here. Sorry, there was an issue. Okay, I'll just put this complete my message or whatever the development I have done it. I can just do that particular part here. Whatever the soap message I was passing it out, I can just copy it. I can park here. I think the beauty here of this particular this tool is that you can actually define your header variable and your property variable. Okay, so now let's say here what I have given is I have this two variable. Let's say I'll define one order number. I'll define it. Let's say 10243. Anything. I can just define it out. This is like how to actually simulate it. I'll click on property same way because I'm reading it somewhere. I need to copy it out. I can define a property here. Might be I can just give it a value as a test. Okay, then because I have a set of variable which is a dummy, so I need to make sure that dummy variable should be there. Okay, else it should give me logically the error part. Okay, so again, what I have done it here, I have put my input payload with header and property. Okay, and then I have written a script based on that. And in case if I want to see how does my output look like, I'm going to click on this button, which is click to execute script or alt enter. So once I do that particular part, you see here, this is giving me the right output. Okay. Because if you see here, it has just concatenated both the things, my order number and my property. That's the first thing it did. And the second thing, what it has done, it has actually set it to my dummy variable. So now let's in case if we have any kind of error message, let me see if this is, if it will give me any message for this. Let me just click on this. So now you see, just within a second now, it says very clearly that you have error at line number 80. Again, similar message, because you look at here, okay, but still the beauty here is that you can just quickly see where is your error message. So now let me see in case if you have used my any method wrong or anything, okay, might be if you're not sure if you have used uppercase, lowercase. The good part is now let's say in case if I've changed here the while using this set property method, I've used S as a capital A. So it just clearly straightforward given me an error that there's an error here at the set property part. Okay. So again, I'll just make it to the lower case, and if I just click on it, click to execute scripts, it will work fine. So I just want to just show you here how this piece of uh, work. Okay, so where we have input script and we have output. You can just pass any kind of a payload. Might be if you are just testing it, might be let's say if you are building some kind of an iFlow at a specific step. So what you can do is just take an input payload, use your whatever the script you have it, and then see if it's giving you the uh, output, correct output as such. And I'll tell you one one interesting part here again to the CPI. Mostly I've seen there is a very less requirement of script. Only in a very extreme cases you need to complicate a script. Okay, I have few scenarios in my mind. Now let's in case if you have to create some kind of a dynamic node at a runtime because of some kind of a text length and all, in that particular case scripting is required. But if you just look at basic scripts, okay, to work out your scenario, there are like 7 or 8 scripts. I'll tell you very straightforward, 7 8 script. If you know, you will be able to actually work around here. So now in case if you're practicing it out, if you're writing a script or maybe you want to just practice out the basic script, just come to this page and just try it out. And if there is any error, you will be able to actually look here into the console bit. Okay. So this is on guys how your this editor works out. Just play around with it, and if there is any question or any point comes to your mind, just let me know as such. Okay. Now I'll move on to the next part. In case if someone has any question, just let me know, or else I'll move on. Okay. So guys, again, I have 2 3 points planned for today. I think one is on the architecture part. Then we are just going to look at might be a process direct adapters or your local process or your local indication process or your looping process call. I think this is what more we have planned for today to actually discuss it out. Okay, but first let me just start with the architecture part of your SAP cloud platform integration, or let me just call it as a cloud integration. Okay, anyone guys, before I hit into this architecture part, any kind of question you have it or anything you might have seen interesting that Sam, I've seen this specific part, and how does it relate to framework, or do you have any kind of anything very specific to architecture, interest, no interest on the architecture part?
Yeah, um, definitely interested.
Okay. I think guys, definitely it's very important that how your SAP CPI's architectural design is placed, so that how does it actually make it a cloud-based integration platform. which is used by many participants, allowed for your flexible resource allocation for different participant and ensure the resources belonging to different participants are strictly separated from each other. Okay, because we have discussed as part of, we call it as a multi-tenancy and all these things. So I think it's very important to understand how this particular architecture of this particular service works out. But before we actually go and deep dive and discuss more about this architecture, I think there are two questions which are very important. Okay. I think the first part is we need to know what what are the runtime components, okay, in charge of message processing during the operation of your integration scenario. Okay, and second part is which components are actually in action when messages pass through your CPI. Okay, I think it's important to just understand these two questions before actually we deep dive into your architecture part. Again, guys, I'll just tell you very clearly this particular architecture. Again, as I mentioned in my last session, this is built on something called your Apache Camel integration framework. Okay, so this is again, this is your open source integration framework, I think, which is being used in different kind of a middleware application. So again, whatever SAP has done it, SAP has built on top of it only. Now, earlier I used to talk about all these things, camel and all these things, but right now, now I'm just relating it out that this is not going to help. Okay, because you cannot see or you cannot make any changes to underlying what SAP has built on top of it. Okay, but now let's say in case if anytime you want to read about anything, okay, maybe if you want to read about your simple language expression. Okay, so here I think you would be able to see things which SAP has given it out. Okay, so most of your syntax or most of the underlying notation is coming from this particular framework only. But I'm sure again it depends on SAP also how they have exposed it out. That's why it's important that first you look at SAP documentation. If there's anything you're looking for a very specific, okay, then might be you can actually come till this particular part. Okay. So now let me just go back again here into what we was discussing it out on the architecture part. Okay. Okay. So now, first of all, this particular platform, SAP, yeah, is there any kind of question? Any question as such, anyone? Okay, perfect. So now when we're just talking about this particular platform, which is your SAP cloud integrations, let me. I think I have mentioned earlier also this bit. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I think this is a perfect slide, which I think we directly reached. So now this particular service, which is your SAP Cloud integration, we call it as the virtual and clustered integration platform. Okay. So what does it means your virtual or your clustered part? So in the context, virtualized means the fundamental entities of the integration platforms are virtual machines rather than the physical ones, and the cluster means that platform is modularized and composed of smaller, more or less independent entities, which make it as a whole or as a cluster. Okay. So last time I've mentioned you this whenever we say we have got some kind of on-demand service, which means that we can access through a browser. So this is some kind of a data center. Let's say suppose we have it. Okay, so where you have all the softwares and your hardware. Now here what SAP does is it's actually create a multiple virtual machines. Okay, it creates a multiple virtual machines and it actually gives you the tenant URL, and you will be able to actually hit to the tenant URL. You will be able to actually work it out, and SAP makes sure that whatever, in case if there are different VMs, they might be share their resources, but the data would be of a specific machine or specific VM will be stick to that particular part only. Okay, so this is an important part here. Okay, so whenever we say that SAP supports multi-tenancy or multi-tenant capable, so that's exactly the same only. Okay, and when someone call it even the tenant, I have this tenant. So tenant is just a logical entities which represents the physical resources of your SAP CPI that are allocated to a specific participant. When I say the word participant, it does means that I am talking about the customer. Okay, so now generally what happens is once you have got your VM, you start working with it. Okay, let me just go back here. What exactly is the issue? Okay, perfect. Okay, so now generally what happens is let me just put it up with the help of these boxes. Now first, a customer gets a global account. Okay, then for that particular global account, let's say we have some kind of a tenant which we receive. Okay, so this tenant has, when I say virtual machine, it has two important nodes. I think one is your TMN node and second is your runtime node. Okay, so these two nodes are very important nodes whenever we are talking about this SAP CPI virtual machine. Okay, so what exactly this particular nodes does, your TMN node and your runtime node. I'm sure this kind of this part TMN, if you look at your URL, you will be actually seeing in the browser also. Okay, so this is your tenant management node. So when I say the word tenant management node, okay, just think of it someone who in your company like take care of the operations part. Okay, the same way this particular node is mostly for your operation part, and this is the second node which is my runtime node. This is for actually executing your messages. So this is how my virtual instance or my virtual machine look like. So this is just comprised of these two important nodes. Now one thing more, just remember that whenever you are sending any kind of a request, okay, might be from outside into your CPI, don't assume that your request will directly hit into your system or that particular any kind of a node. No. So what just happens is in between also you have some kind of a load balancer. Okay, so when I say you have some kind of a load balancer, so all your requests which you send from outside into the CPI, this will actually terminate at your load balancer here. Okay. So again, SAP is using a load balancer. I'm sure I think people would have heard the word load balancer. So now let's say what does a load balancer mean? So now let's say in case if we have your now let's say in case if we are using any kind of e-commerce application and there are like multiple requests. coming it out, or might be we are pushing multiple orders, or any request which is coming into the CPI. So now this load balancer take care of the load and make sure that based on the server which are available, it will actually pass the request. So that one server does not get all the requests. Okay, so it's just distribute the your request coming from the outside part. So again, I don't see initially. I think one time I've seen when you go to the info mode anytime, okay, you will see the big IP somewhere. Okay, so because SAP is using big IP as a load balancer in your SAP CPI. Okay, so this big IP is a product which is by your F5 networks. So so now your how your overall system look like? Let me just put that part also. I think it will be might not clear. I'll just tell you the word tenant cluster also, and then how this part works out. As such, you don't have any kind of a clear architecture as such here. I think based on what I've read. So I'll just put it here. Let me just first put it out the structure, and then I'll just go step by step.
Sam, you had also mentioned in previous classes about IFL. So also mention where that stands here.
Integration flow mapping, you mean? IFL map
Yes,
node
yes,
using, huh?
IFL.
See, IFL map
Yes, yes.
node is mostly just tagged for your enterprise service bus. I think whenever it was generating an endpoint, I think that time only mentioned that this is taking care of that enterprise service bus. So if anytime you want to send a request, you need to have the ESB role with you.
So where that stands here in this picture?
In this picture, it's just not a part. So whenever you have to send any kind of a request onto the CPI, then you need that
Mhm.
part here.
Okay.
Okay. So guys, again, I just want to put in a very simple things. You will not see anything very much used. So now what they say is whenever we are sending any kind of a request onto the CPI, so load balancer is just on at the CPI only. Okay, just for the diagram of just placed outside. So whenever you're sending a request, so all the request gets submitted here at the load balancer, I think your request will pass to this tenant management node. So I think this tenant management nodes, what it does, its job is as an operation manager. Okay, so it what's going to do it's just going to pass a request to the runtime node. So this runtime node is an important node which actually executes your message. So each steps, it's write to the message content, because if you look at the steps, so at every step it executes, writes back message to the message content, and again I just move it, because if you look at any kind while tracing also in the message content, every step the payload changes, might be due to some specific logic what we have written it out here. And once you're finally your complete your message gets executed, it writes a message here into the monitoring data, and the TMN node, whatever this node is, its job is to actually show the data. So whenever we click here on the monitoring part, okay, so the monitoring data which we see in the screen, it is being read by this TMN node. Okay, so that's the node which we have in this virtual instance of your uh, SAP CPI. Now, I've written here the tenant clusters. Why I've written this word tenant cluster? So cluster is typically composed of your one tenant management node with one runtime node. Now, let's say in case if you want to have multiple runtime node, that is also possible. Okay, because now there are chances that your customer might have a kind of a heavy traffic, or there are like 10,000 or 50,000 messages which gets executed, might be within an hour or within a day. So in that particular case, you can actually get multiple nodes up and running. Okay, multiple runtime nodes, you can actually get it out. Again, the communication between the nodes of your cluster can also be done using this messaging services that again is based on something called Apache Active MQ. Okay, again, that's a part of your Apache camera integration framework only. Okay, so this is how your actually uh, tenant tenant or what these two nodes are. Again, I'm sure people would have this question in their mind that Sam, now let's say, okay, let's say this is how the structure is placed, but now I just want to understand how this graphical your the definition or how we define our integration flow. So now let's say in case if I want to how this particular gets executed onto that particular virtual machines. Okay, so now again for that particular part here we have this Apache Camel framework. Okay, so now what it actually does is, let me just quickly go here. Okay, so now when we're just talking about your integration flow, so here, so now let's say in case if we have any kind of integration flow with us, okay, so whenever we just click on deploy, okay, so what actually happens is for this particular integration flow, so we have so by framework only, I think it will just generate something called camel XML. Okay, okay, so again, this is something which happens on the framework side. So it will again actually converts once we click on deploy. So it actually converts into something or something for a lower level system to understand, which is your camel XML. Once you define your camel XML, again, what happens is your XML does not get executed. Again, for that part, we have to create some kind of a camel context. Okay, so once we have a camel context which gets generated, so this is the final part, okay, which actually gets executed into this particular runtime node. So this is the one which actually gets executed here on the runtime node, or I should call it as a your VM machine. Okay, so this is how in a lower language or a lower or from the system perspective, this is how it actually works out. Anyone, any kind of a questions here as such on this particular bit?
Just quick question. Load balancer, like whenever you're giving
Just,
the
just
URL CP.
guys,
So,
if you can just go just by one by one, I think that would be helpful.
what I was asking, when you say load balancer, like when we are giving the CP URL to external party is calling, is they are going to hit first of all load balancer? Do we need to care about anything load balancer URL or host name, port number? We have to give
Not,
it to external party.
nothing you have to do it, right? I'm just telling you how the actually the internal structure works out. You will never see even the load balancer anywhere. You just have to give the UI, you just have to give whatever the endpoint you have it. Okay, as simple as that. But I'm just telling you how the standard framework works out. Whenever the request goes, so there is an internal functionality of load balancer which takes care of everything. Again, I think this kind of things I was just able to read it out and I'm just telling you out.
Okay.
So
Thank
you
you.
don't have to take care of anything on the load balancer part. Again, guys, as
Okay.
I mentioned the last time also that again now I've just stopped going on again on this particular framework. Again, I think why I started, I'll just tell you the reason also. Again, when we are talking about your Apache Camel framework, okay, so there are different kind of components which are used. Okay, so what are those different kind of components of your Apache Camel framework? Uh, let me. Okay, so now how come I was going through this bit? So now what happens is one time initially when I was uh, just deploying my flow. So while we go to the endpoint bit, so you see here we have the CXF. Okay, you remember? I hope everyone remember that when we deploy our iFlow for a SOAP adapter specifically, so we have this word CXF comes up. Now till here, I think everyone relates out that Sam, this might be is our system, so that's okay. This is my endpoint which I have given for my iFlow. Let me just quickly go here. Okay, so this is I have given myself this particular part. Now, I think someone asked me that time, why do we have the CXF got automatically prefix and what exactly is the purpose of it? So now what happens is I was just reading it out, then I get to understand. So what happens is, guys, when we're just talking about your Apache Camel framework, okay, so again, this is built in conjunction with other open source framework also, okay. So what are those? So one is your Apache CXF. So your CXF stands for your Celtx Fire. Okay. So Celtx Fire is allows you to connect the integration runtime to your remote component based on your web services standard. So this is one of the open source component which is used in our framework. I think the second one is used your OSGI. Again, OSGI stands for your Open Service Gateway Initiative. Again, this is used as a module systems. Okay. So now how does this OIGI bundles get created or deployed? So SAP is using something called Equinox as its OSGI implementation. Again, this was a part of this framework because sometimes you deploy your message, sometimes you get your OSGI bundle error. Let me just see here. Not here. Bundle file. This is the bundle file. Yeah, I know. Okay, so this is here. This is due to this bundling. We have this deployment error. Okay, so but end of the day, I'll just tell you one thing. This is just good to know things. Okay, because end of the day, how underlying it works out, you cannot make any kind of a change. But yeah, I think it's just a good to know. So yes, anyone else anything on this particular part?
And you mentioned TMN. What does it mean? TMN. What does it
Okay,
stand for?
okay, TMN stands for your tenant management node. Okay.
Okay.
So guys, now I have actually put it very quickly. So now here I think two things we need to understand. First thing is how SAP CPI virtual runtime look like. Okay. I think this word virtual runtime is important because your virtual runtime composed of two important nodes, TMN and tenant management node and your runtime node. I hope this part is clear. Second important thing which I have talked here is how your let me just sorry. Okay. So now when I write this integration framework relates to VMS, I think this is very simple. So your VM is consist of your these two nodes, and when I say the integration framework, this Apache Camel framework. So how this both relates, you know now that whenever we create an iFlow here, so this is your graphical part. Okay. So when I say this graphical part, end of the day, any kind of programming language, it has to be converted into some kind of a lower syntax. So this graphical part, what I'm saying here, once we deploy, it creates a camel XML. Again, for a camel, again underlying there is some kind of a context which gets created, or we call it as a camel root also. Okay. So again, when someone says what is a camel route, so again, this is just a sequence of how message is flowing in the integration flow. So this is your sequence, as I mentioned you. So this will actually just take care of how the sequence is. So all this will be converted into something which is lower. Let's say like your here your if else or your statement base. And once you convert into a lower syntax or a camel XML, you can easily execute onto the runtime. This guy, this TMN guy, his job is mostly to take care of or the operation part of the systems. Okay, or help give runtime node necessary thing to work out. As simple as that. Any questions? If you have any kind of point, I think guys we can just quickly discuss it out here. All good? Okay. So guys, this was just a quick about your how does your SAP CPI overall. I think what are the virtual part of it and how does your Apache Camel frameworks or what it does so that your VM understand and actually execute your message part. Okay, so I'll just move on to the next important bit, which is your local integration process. So now again, I think we have to take uh, a step ahead into our story. So let me just quickly go here. Okay, now I'll just ask you guys one thing. Do you think that now let's in case if we have more and more requirement to put here logic, do you think that in this one integration process everything will be able to fit it out? Any one of you? Okay, definitely when we are seeing this particular screen, okay, or this integration process, so we have so now again, I'm not sure if any one of you has seen how we used to develop on Eclipse, okay, because we used to able it link this particular tenant and we have a more flexibility in the Eclipse tooling for building this integration flow. I think this is a 4 or 4.5 years back. I think this particular uh, I think tool has been provided by SAP, or this graphical tool provided by SAP, where you can actually build it out. Now what happens is very similar to now when we are writing our logic, we actually try to break it into your sub-function modules the same way we do have the process of having your local integration process. When I say the word local integration process, what does it mean is that we would be able to actually split our iFlow into small pieces. Again, when I say small pieces, again, that's kind of a modularization. And when I say modularization, might be to actually help us, might be while testing it up, our functionality, it actually helps a lot. So how does that particular part work? Let me just quickly go here. Sorry, let me just quickly go to the package here. Let me just copy this one here. I'll just prefix with local integration process. So now let's in case if we have this particular iFlow and now I want to might be split or might be I want to just break this complex functionality which we have already built it out. Okay. So now how to do that particular part? So in this particular case, we have option provided by SAP. In a process, we have seen exceptions of process. So now we have integration process and we have a local integration process. So I'll just talk about this part later. So now what I can do is I can just quickly select on the local integration process. I can just quickly place it somewhere outside here. Okay. So now this local integration process, we can actually call it from your main process. And now let's say whatever the routing functionalities I have it. So now let's say I want to put it my that piece of functionality here. So how to do that particular part? Okay. In this particular case, what I'm gonna do here is let me see if I have. Okay, perfect. So I can actually I can break this particular path here. I can just take everything here. I'll just try to, because when your iFlow will get huge, it will be very difficult to manage these boxes. Let me just delete this end path. I think let me just okay. So now again, if you just look at step by steps, now in our local integration process, so whatever the end we have it here. Okay, so here we have this message end. Okay, and whatever the end we have in the local integration process, it's just end event. In case if you want to get more end event, what you can do is you can just go onto this event palette option. Here you have your end event. Now let's say, or might be we can just have just only one end event also. There is a no harm. Okay. So now guys, what I have done in this particular iFlow is whatever the functionality I have built for my logic part here, okay, just for the routing capabilities, whatever I've built here, I have this routing logic already written in my last discussion where we have just checked this against an order number here, okay, and based on that, again, I think in a content modifier we have given the hard-coded messages. Now I just bring in this complete functionality into a local integration process. So now let's say in case if it needs to be changed, so this we have to just come here and fix that particular part. Now this is a local integration process defined. Now definitely important part would be that Sam, how from a main integration process I can actually call this local integration process. So for this particular part, what will happen is here go and if you go to this call, this is a bidirectional call sign here in the palette option. If you click here, you have something called external call and your local call. If I say the word external call, what does it mean? It has like your content enricher, poll enrich, request reply, and a send. This again we're going to look at. And when we're saying the local call, we have this is a new option which is just added. Okay. Again, I haven't myself is seeing for the first time, honestly. This is a looping process call and you have a process call. So we'll just look at first this option of a process call. So let me just select this particular part. Let me just place it here. Let me just try to connect it here into the process call. And then from the process call, I'll just connect to the end message. Now I'm sure everyone would be thinking that Sam, how these two pieces will be connected or this will be also automatic like your exception handler. So guys, definitely no. Anytime if you want to connect any kind of a local integration process to the main call, how you can do that part, if you just go here and go to the properties part here, click on select, you'll be able to see whatever the local integration process you want to choose it out here. So I can quickly choose this local integration process. So this is going to call this process part. So now how from a scenario perspective this will work out. So guys, your content modifier, once it will hit in, okay, so what will happen is, so the request will go to the start. Okay, so this you can just assume that this is like your function call. Okay, so once you come here, this will automatically call your message. Again, message carries headers and properties. So anything, whatever you write, your logic, what we have written based on header or property, you should be able to follow the same path. Now, whatever the logic you want to define it, X, Y, Z, whatever you want to define it, you can define that particular part. Once your ends get terminated, again, your callback will go to this process call only. Okay, and once this gets over, again, your steps would be the going forward steps remains the same only. Okay, let me quickly click on save. Now again, if you are for the first time, if you don't know about much more or about this local integration process, I think the best part is just select this local integration process, click on the help part. Okay, so it will actually take you to the page, okay, which would be talking about what this local integration process do. So here, if you look at this text, it says you use this local integration process to simplify your integration process. You can break the main integration process into a smaller fragments by using a local integration processes. So now what happens is if you are working on some kind of a huge chunk of functionality which is doing a multiple things, okay. Logically, whenever you're defining your or creating an iFlow, it will be a good part that what are the main pieces or main process or main functionality of your iFlow. Might be receiving a payload is or receiving an input is one thing. Might be if there's any kind of external service call, then plus enriching our data, anything. It will be always a good part that if you can actually just try to break into multiple steps. And once you're able to multiple steps, then I think if this is like your function modules, you can just create multiple local integration process where you define your functionalities. And if you want to make a change, then I think for you it's very easy actually, honestly. Okay, because if you are able to split it out while testing it also, what you have to do is you can just simulate or test between these two steps or whatever that steps you have it. So it's actually helpful. Now again, as I mentioned you the last time, whenever we are here into this any kind of property if you're doing for the first time. So now here also, let's say we have the steps. You cannot use the following integration flow steps within a local integration process. Another local integration process, yes. End message, no. Sender, receiver, no. So this is the things which you will not be able to do inside your local integration process because definitely it makes sense. Okay, you cannot connect to sender receiver within your local integration process. Now, one more thing, just do remember that particular part. Anytime if you have a local integration process and you might be want to uh, again have some kind of exception handling place here. Okay, so again, as we have put it for your integration process, so what we can do is we can put an exception sub process here inside for your local integration process too. So if there is any kind of error, you will be able to actually contain here into this exception sub process. So this you will be able to do it out here. Now I can just quickly do on save. Any question?
Sam, how local and global data is managed? Like if suppose if I am changing something in local process, will that be reflected in the upper one in the first section, iFlow?
See again, I think so your message would be at one time it will be at one place only. Okay, it will be might at the main part or it will be in the local integration process. As I've told you, once
The way,
message flow.
okay, the way it happens in function module, like
No, does not relate exactly. Don't relate exactly to that particular part. Let's say here when I say your message goes here into the process call and it enters into the local integration process, it carries with himself your headers and your properties as such. Okay, and if I
okay,
execute it here, if it just goes back, it remains the same. So if you have a local integration process, it will be able to enjoy all the things or your header or your properties value as such. Okay, and
okay,
sometimes it happens that people wants to make sure that okay they don't lose the data or might be there is some kind of data transformation. So before a step, they can just use they can save a payload in some kind of a variable. So there are multiple things. So now let's just do one thing. Now let's just try to quickly test it out how my message or how this flow work out. I think I've clicked on deploy. Let me just undeploy what I don't need. Hmm. Again, guys, I think it will go for error. I'm not sure why the count has not changed. I think the reason is anyone can tell me why this will fail? Anyone? Okay, guys, what will happen is in case if we're just talking about this particular integration flow, so again, I think this is registered with the same endpoint, input endpoint. So this cannot be same. So if you see here, we have done a copy, so it endpoint will remain the same, so it will not work out. Let me just change it. Let me deploy it out because we cannot have a same endpoint for a multiple iflows. So let's just wait. I think last time I haven't clicked on deploy. That's why this counter was not 31. It would have gone on this deployment error here. I think now this is deployed. Let me just quickly go here. So we just copy this particular endpoint. Let me again now. Now let me just do one thing again. Send a request here at this particular endpoint. Let me just submit a request. So let me just quickly do one thing. Let me just go inside the trace part. So now in case if you look at here, so what just happened is now from your content modifier. So once this hits into this pattern of a process call, it is going to actually call this local integration process. So let's say if we have a message at this step, if you look at the message content, so it will have this headers and this property. So now if I go here below at your router, and if I look at the message content, so it will be having the same thing because message will carry all the information with it itself. Now again, so what again what will happen is again I think it's just going to follow the straightforward path based on whatever the logic you do here in your local integration process. Once it's come to the end part, again it will again the call will go back to this process call only. Okay, and then from here it will pass back to the end. Now I think the best way is always to validate your message from here. So if you just look at here, so your first SOAP request comes, content modifier, your Groovy script, content modifier to the process call. From here, what will happen is it will call the router, content modifier 3, Groovy script, and then the control will come back here, and then you have the final end message here. So this is what happened, guys. If you want to split the functionalities, okay, then you can actually achieve with the help of this local integration process. So any question here as such here, guys?
No, from my side.
Okay, perfect.
Sam, if we want to capture the exception in the main process, okay.
Mhm.
So how do you capture? Because we can have multiple local IPO, right?
Guys, as I mentioned you, so now let's in case if we're just talking about your if you want to capture an exception process in your main, then what you have to do is you have to implement your exception handling here in your main process also. As simple as that. Okay. Does it help you?
Okay.
Again, I think just try it. As I mentioned, for a process, you can just have only one exception sub process. You cannot don't think that you will be able to put here multiple exceptions sub process. No, that's not possible as such. Because if you just try to do that particular part, might be it can allow you save. After that, might be it will just give you error. Okay, now good part is now here only it is giving error. And if you want to see errors, go to the integration flow properties, go to this problems, and you have here the part. Only a one exception the process is supported in each pool. Okay, so but good part is definitely if you are implementing your local integration process, and yeah, while building some kind of a logic, you can have your exceptions of process. So you can actually put it out here exceptions sub processes in your local processes too. Now this is what I was talking about. Now let's say if you have some kind of a mapping logic, external web service, or some kind of a decision based logic. You can just do one thing, might be web service. You can do in one local integration process, have an exception handling, mapping in another local integration process, and do that particular part. I have seen standard SAP iFlows. Trust me. Okay, what they have done is you will see a sequence of process call one, then you see a process call two, and then you have a process call three. Start, process call one, process call two, process call three, and end. So they have functionality defined in the local integration process only. So there are again different ways to build it out, but this will be helpful one if you want to split and look and if you want to have a good clarity about your integration flow, because currently see this is looking is okay, it's a very small one, but once it grows big, it's very difficult to manage. Trust me, it's very difficult to manage. So yeah, uh, okay. Any question from anyone?
Sam, see, how is it calling technically when you introduce process call? How is it
Okay,
calling a particular?
sorry, I'm not able to hear it. What it's going to call you particular? Hello, sir, I'm not able to hear you out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's much better.
Yeah, sorry. See, you added three process calls right now.
Okay.
So, for an example, I have three different locals. So, how do you map those to respective?
Well, it's very simple. So now let's say if you have put one process call, if you have put it a second process call, okay, and now let's say if I have two local integration process also for this. Now let's say if here, okay, so this my local integration process two, whatever the logic I want to define, this is my one. Now let's say if I go here, you can quickly choose which is the local integration process you want to call it. So this is very simple. You just have to go to your process call and you just need to choose which is the local integration process you want to call it out. So this is a one part of it, guys. Now I think the second part comes, which is the looping process call. Okay, so because if you look at the option here, let me just build a new flow for that particular bit. Okay, guys. Now what happens is now when I'm just talking about a looping process call. So now there are cases. Okay. Okay. So now, guys, let's say if I'm sending a request from my sender, it comes to this particular start, might be now what happens is might be now let's say instead of having or sending from this particular from your input request, I'm just sending here like a one record. There are scenarios where I can send a multiple order in a one go also. That's that kind of scenario are possible. So now let's say there are scenario where I want to have some kind of a loop. So now let's say might be you want to read one node and make a check. Again, you want to read a second node and put a check. Sorry. So now let's say in case if you want to execute a block or a pool or a local integration process again and again, SAP provides you the functionality of your looping process call. Okay. So now in that particular case, you are going to call this loop again and again. So how to do this particular part? So for this, what I'll just do quickly is I'll just put a content. Okay. Okay. And might be what I'm gonna do here is in if you just look at in your local call, there were two things. One was a process call, second one was a looping process call. Now again, I think it's always good if you just hover over to this particular option, it just give you a quick inform about that particular step. So process call is add a process call step to execute steps defined under the local integration process tool. If I hover over to looping process call, it says add a local process step to repeatedly execute steps defined into a local integration process. So definitely in case if it's a loop, so there would be something different here. I click on the loop part, and if you just look at here, there is a difference between even your pattern sign. In normal process call, you have this icon, but with the looping, this have this kind of symbol is also there. So you can even I think differentiate, or if some kind of iflow you see, you know that where is a looping and where is a normal process call. If someone changes even the name here, so this is how you'll be able to differentiate it out. But definitely we would be very interested that okay, everything is fine, everything is good, but how does your looping process call works out, or how does the functionality, or what are the different options available? So if I just choose a looping process call, go here in the processing part of it, so we do have a different kind of functionality. First of all, in the looping process call, first of all, you have to select the local integration process, because yes, if I want to execute a block, I should know which is the block. I can quickly click on, I can select it out. But here, this is an important part. Here you have a loop condition detail. So first again, you have a loop condition detail where you can actually define it out. How there are four things: expression type, condition expression, number of iterations, action when maximum iterations reach. So again, you know, XML and non-XML, it's very clear. If you're talking about XML, then definitely you have to read your XPath. If you're talking about a non-XML, so it's more about your using your simple language expression, might be using some kind of header or property variable. Now, what else we can see here? Condition expression. So it says very here you define your condition, XML or non-XML. Again, I think the example are below. You can do that part, and this is again maximum number of iterations. Guys, again, I think these two features are very interesting. It says when I hover over to the maximum number of iterations, it says specify the maximum number of iterations that loop should be executed. Even the condition is still met, the loop end afterwards. So now let's say if you have written some kind of a loop here, based on that, now let's say if you are executing a loop and might be expecting that it should go, let's say 100 times. But if here, if you mention 60, maximum number of iterations 60, if my condition met, but still this loop will actually terminate here. So this is one very different feature I have seen it, maximum number of iteration here. So if you define it, it cannot just go afterward even the condition met. Second part is action when maximum iteration reach. Okay, so I think this is always important, because if you hover over to it or any kind of field into SAP CPI, the good part is you will be able to see some kind of a text. So it says select to throw an exception when the maximum number of iteration has been reached to, or exit the loop, or continue with the main process without error, even the looping condition continues to be true. Again, there are two things: throw exceptions or end loop. Again, I think it's always good to look at your situation and use an option. Again, I think for our process, I can use the end loop as such here. But now important is what kind of a condition I define it here. So now let's say might be for this particular case, I say onto property, I say, let's say I define a variable counter, I define it as a constant. Yeah, I can define it as a constant, and I can just give it a value, let's say 2 here. Okay. I'll go to this looping process call because we haven't defined this mandatory expression, so due to which it's giving me error here. Now here, how can I define my condition here? Again, we can use a simple languages expression because expression type is a non-XML. So dollar your flower brackets, and then you can just do property dot counter. I hope C is small or upper. Let me just check it out. Small. Okay. Make sure, guys, this variable naming is always important. Okay, so now here what I can just say, in case if the value is less than 8, okay, till the value is less than 8, this loop should get executed. Let me just quickly click on save. Okay, so this is I have defined a condition for my looping process call. Here, let me just define SOAP connection also here. Let me click on save. Now I hope we are very clear here. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just taking a message request. In content modifier, I've created a counter variable which has a value 2, and then in my looping condition or my this looping process call, I've defined a condition that it should call this block till the condition is if the property counter is less than 8. Okay, so this is what syntax I have written here. Now definitely what I need to do here is I might have to put some kind of a logic here that to might be increase the counter, because I cannot just go on and let it go every time. So I have to might be increase the counter here in this particular, or something I have to do it here. So for that particular part, what I can do is I can go again onto the script. I can just use a Groovy script. I can just quickly place it here. Let me just define a new script as such here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is again very simple. I'm just going to read that particular variable, which is my properties. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to get a counter, or might be after getting my counter value, then might be I can just increase this to 2 and again set back the value part. So let me just I think I can just reuse the code here. So here I'm just going to get all the properties here. Okay, so now let me just so now here I'm just going to use map. Have change and the value. I think I can just define any kind of a variable here. So what my particular purpose here is, first the value I read from counter, this variable read. I'll convert it to integer. And then I'll add +2 on this. Okay, and then once we have the values, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to set that into property. Okay, so guys, any kind of a question here? So I've done very simple thing. Okay, at this step, I am going to read the properties because I have to read a variable counter. Okay, I have read into this variable read, and then I'm just going to increment by +2, and then I'm again going to set the value. So now let's say first time when I read, the value will be 2. So 2 + 2 4. It will set the value 4. Next time again it will go check in the main loop what is the value of counter, again 4 is less than something, and then again it will come back here. So now again, we have a way to validate that particular part too, because once we do a save and a deploy, what will happen is once we check onto the trace mode, we should be able to validate this part out. Click on save, click on deploy, and let's see how this actually works out. So in case if you don't need, let me just undeploy this part out. Let's wait for it to get it deployed. I think this is deployed. Let me just get the endpoint. Let me enable the trace here. So now what I can do here is again I can just send a request. Okay, let me just send a request from here. I think this is completed. So let me just do one thing. Let me just go to the trace here. Okay. So now we'll just see how the steps work out. So again, SOAP content modifier and the looping process call. So what will happen here is if the first time it will call, I'll see what is my property variable value here. So my counter variable value is 2. It's going to go to the script step. I think we have written in the script that it should increase the counter by 2. So if I go after this step, okay, because where the changes will reflect here, okay, let me just go here onto the Groovy script too, then I think we should be able to validate this part. So you see here the counter value is 4. So whatever the script we have written to increase by 2, I think that worked. So now the next value is counter value is 4. Again, after this particular step, if I go on to this one, so this would be 6. Okay, and then it goes again back to the looping process call. Again, it will just check what is the logic we have written here in the, or what is the condition for it. So the condition was if the property dot count is less than 8, then this should get executed. So at this point, let me see what is the value. I think the last value was 8, so it is 8 less than 8. That's why it actually break that particular loop. It comes out, and your this is how your final payload look like. As such, we haven't done any kind of a change on the payload. We were just playing with the counter values just to use this looping process call concept and call this local integration process. So this is what we were doing it out. So any questions there, guys?
Hi Sam, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
If there is a scenario that we have multiple sales order, and in every sales order we have multiple line items. So the requirement is if we want to sum or consolidate all the line item which have the same material type. So we want to consolidate based on the quantity, means we need to sum the quantity and the price. So how we apply the loop within the loop in this scenario?
See, guys, I think what scenario you're talking about, I think it's not necessary that it has to be you need to use local indication process. Now, when you're saying at line item you want to combine based on the quantity.
No, based on the material, I want to consolidate the quantity and the price.
See, again, I think this can be easily done. I don't think so you need a local integration process for that particular part. Again, we do have a concept. I think I have done a similar use cases where sales order was coming with multiple line items and with a different kind of a plant. Okay. But when I
Okay.
have to pass this to S4, I need to just combine the items for the same plant into one order. Might be, let's say if I have a 6 line item, 2 are for plant 1, 2 are for plant 2, 2 are for plant 3. So I have to actually split it out in such a way that my one order should be created with line item plant 1, next order should be created with plant 2, and third with the plant 3. So in that particular case, I've used the concept of multicast. I've split first of all my message into 3 or 4 based on the requirement, and then I have tried to put a filter. Only items with specific material type should get filtered out. So that's
Okay.
how we have done in our use case. Because again, it's not necessary that if you have seen this, this is how to loop it out. There are different kind of features what we have it. But in case we want to again practically discuss this, maybe we can have a separate session and discuss your part.
Sure. Okay.
Cool.
I have one question. Can we
Please.
do it? Okay. Can we do it in a dynamic manner? Suppose, like I am not aware how many records are there in my payload. Okay. So, like here you have put a condition like less than 8, but I don't know how many records are there. So, can we do like in a dynamic manner where we don't know the records
Yeah.
number?
Yeah, you can do that particular part. You can do that particular part. I think there is a one way. Some people do that while sending a message. They pass a counter. Okay. Some people some way sending it out. They do that particular part. Might be in a header. They can do that particular part. Second is thing
Okay.
is what we
Sender,
can do
sender
is
will, okay. So
again
sender
that's a
will send.
way. It's not necessary sender has to. I'm just telling you again multiple options. Sender can send. Second thing is once a records come to your CPI, might be you can just put a count and you can just see what are the different number of records you have received. That's a second point. So once you have some kind of a count, you can save into some variable and then might be dynamically you can define in your condition also. So that can also be done as such.
Sam, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, is it mandatory that we need to define the counter?
No, man, I think that's just a condition which I've used for my scenario.
No, I'm saying means suppose I don't know how many numbers of records we are getting. So, is it mandatory that we need to get the counter value from the?
No, guys, no, I don't think so. Please don't go in the counter direction. I think you have to think more on the condition. If your loop has to call this local integration process multiple times, you have to define the condition. So this is for my use case. I've just used this use case, but might be for your use case, you can define it, your condition in different way. This condition is required, as simple as that, because it needs a condition that on what condition I should call this local integration process multiple times. As simple as that.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you.